He is the commissioner of the SECs. Greg Sankey joins us on the program. How many games did you go to in the last week?
4. And week 0, I was at Vandy, so I'm 5 games into my season already.
Do you tailgate?
No, there's a bit of a hazard for me walking through tailgates. Most, people when they're together are actually really nice in person. On social media, maybe not quite.
Well, commissioners always get booed. Do you get booed?
Oh, it's happened a couple of times. I was at the LSU national championship celebration and smattering, but most people are really kind. And I reminded them it was the first year that the conference had approved beer sales in Tiger Stadium, which resulted in a great positive roar. So you just got to know how to play the game if you're me.
How would you recap the summer for college football?
Oh, wow. I will say this year, July 4th weekend was quiet, which is unlike the last 5 years. So we had the chance to celebrate July 4th without the cell phone in hand. But certainly a time of change. I think the pressures that are there. I saw Jack last week. I expressed my disappointment. I was not on set in Dublin with you and Will Ferrell, but we'll do it by Zoom. And he expressed a perspective. I probably wouldn't describe it quite with those same terms, but it's a time of change, a time of pressure, a time that has a level of discomfort across college football and really, I think, all of college sports.
In case people, what the commissioner is referring to, Jack Swarbrick, the athletic director at Notre Dame, had this to say 2 weeks ago in Ireland. Can you sum up what's happened with college football in the last, where would you start?
Complete disaster.
How did we get here, Jack?
I wish I knew. And listen, I'm not, everybody in the industry has to take responsibility here. I'm not excluding myself from that. I think the decision-making has lost its way in terms of the focus on the student athlete and what's primarily best for them. But we are where we are, and we have to try and make it work. I mean, we've been pretty vocal in the past month about we need to find a home for Stanford and Cal. That you can't have two of the great academic institutions in the world not have a place to play.
How do you think Jack got to this bottom line there?
Well, I thought his follow-on comment was really important. The observations about shared responsibility, about decision-making. We all look at reality from our perspectives, and the Southeastern Conference has made decisions over the last few years, the addition of Oklahoma and Texas, for example, that actually did contemplate the student-athlete experience, our ability to add 95 miles to our geography, but elevate our competitive experience, bring in national champions, and challenge ourselves. But we've historically been slow to adapt in college athletics. That's not new. That's not like this decade's or this generation's issue. We now have a set of external pressures that I think are part of Jack's observation that create the discomfort. So we have state legislatures making laws and dictating how we will run athletic programs. We have interest from Congress. I'm not clear that there's a commitment to help restore a national standard. We have change in the NCAA. I've appreciated Charlie Baker, but we're still dealing with a bureaucracy that is slow to adapt to modern realities. And at the same time, on our campuses and in our conference office, we have to adapt to those modern realities every day. So, Dan, I think that's a combination of frustration you heard, but also the change that's inherent in our society right now.
What concerns you more, name, image, and likeness, or the transfer portal?
I would say the ecosystem, if you will, or the environment that's developed around name, image, and likeness, going back to 2018, 2019, that label would have been envisioned in a certain way. And we have any number of student athletes. You think about Bryce Young and Dr. Pepper ads and Olivia Dunn and Viore commercials. I mean, that's what it was. We had football linemen telling us about a car wash deal that they have for all their pickup trucks. And that's normal activity. What's happened is it's become a recruiting inducement. It's allowed outside influences, boosters, if you will, and now collectives that we've held off from being involved in recruiting. They've entered this realm. And I think bottom line, what that means is, one, we've shifted control of our athletics programs away from campus leaders who do have an accountability structure. We also have created questions of, hey, when I'm student athlete from team A lining up against a competitor from team B, are we actually playing by the same rules? And that's where we have to have the restoration of a national standard. That's happened around this name, image, and likeness space. And it's developed in a way that's not exactly what would have been envisioned, as I described 4 or 5 years ago.
What's the craziest amount of money you've heard that a player is getting?
Well, I read the media accounts, and I actually don't believe what I read. So you've seen multiple millions. I question whether that's true, because people involved in this NIL space, third parties, agents, NIL reps, are incentivized to inflate the number. And you asked about NIL or transfer portal, so I had to pick one. But what we have is a layering of the issue. So more transfer freedom, which that's our reality. But it's been layered with the ability to now go out and inflate numbers. And so I think there has to be care in believing the numbers that one sees publicly.
He's the commissioner of the SEC, Greg Sankey. Finish this sentence. If the SEC didn't bring in Oklahoma and Texas,
There's been a lot more pressure on me the last few weeks, a lot more questions. And from my perspective, our decision in 21 has been shown to have been a really wise decision. And one of the cool things, just from the time we're talking, is Texas will be playing Alabama this Saturday, which is I think a sign or an indication into our future and the excitement around these competitions in a 16-team SEC.
but this sort of started the game of musical chairs, didn't it? Texas, Oklahoma?
Well, I think you have to go back to expansion in the early 2000s, Dan. I mean, that's reality. So the Big East, losing 3 members initially to the ACC, and then a member to the Big Ten, 3 more members to the ACC, it dissolved. That seemed to be a time very different than what we had experienced before, when, for instance, Arkansas and South Carolina joined, or joined the SEC, or Penn State joined the Big Ten. You then had the Pac-10 at the time trying to grow to the Pac-16. That created change. A year later, we went from 12 to 14. So I don't think you can go back to just the summer of 21. The summer of 21 was different. But one of the questions my presidents asked me as we were considering the growth is, what does the Big 12 do? So the Big 12 had opportunities to add members. It went as the Big 12 from 10 to 14 and then to 12 when Oklahoma moves. What happened this summer is different. So the decisions to go in a very different geographic direction, some of that happened in 22. I'd submit, when you look over time, those are a little bit different. But if people want to point the finger at our expansion, I'll take that responsibility. I will just note, and I think you and I have probably discussed it, way back in 2015, I offered some perspectives to our president. That was my first meeting as commissioner, that change was coming around the 22, 23, 24 cycle, when these media agreements were renegotiated, and that was pretty prophetic.
Yeah, I just wonder, couldn't we keep the Pac-12 playing football against the Pac-12? Why do we have to bring all the other sports to these other conferences? I'm trying to understand the geography so you don't have to disrupt the Pac-12.
I've been asked that question a couple of times. My response is usually I'm the least qualified one to answer, since when we expanded, we had about 95 miles to our geography.
Yeah.
I think it could have remained. Decisions made by campus decision makers and conference decision makers. I think there were public observations dating back to the summer of 22 about potential movement. You have different people in commissioner roles. You have different perspectives on traditions or traditional alignments. That's what seems to have provided these opportunities, or these opportunities for change. I think the Pac-12 could have resided. And Dan, embedded in the question is a bit of the observation we've seen of just let football operate on its own. And I've said, and I'll say to you, we operate athletic departments. Football, at least at this point, is not divorced from everything else we do. It may be different. The stadiums are bigger than the arenas. But for us, we view the connectedness, that there are relationships with our athletics departments that are healthy. And you know what? In the Southeastern Conference, we got huge football games. We have huge baseball games relative to the rest of the world. I think those reflect on each other and build the intensity, the rivalries, and the interests, just like basketball and volleyball and softball do. And I don't want us to sacrifice that for what becomes a short-term solution. Lastly, on this break football out idea, I don't know how you'd ever tell a football player. Last year we had the first round draft pick in the NFL draft, first round in Major League Baseball, the first collegiate picked in the NBA draft, and the first draft pick in the WNBA. I don't know how you say to the football player, we can do A, B, and C for you, but to the basketball player, men and women, and the baseball player, even though you're going to be a draft pick who's going to make a bunch of money, we can't do these things because we're stuck in this other organization.
College football needs a boss, right?
Well, that's one way to ask the question. Do we all go back to the summer of 20? If we had all said somebody else is going to make the decision for the Southeastern Conference about whether we play in the fall of 20, I don't see that working terribly well. So it's a simple observation with a set of complexities.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But I think, look, I'm a traditionalist. I want these rivalries. I want to make sure that we have some kind of fiscal sanity here, not just everybody's got to go and get their money. That's what concerns me. Nobody's concerned about that these schools are leaving, getting more money, but then the kids want to go and get more money, and then we have a bigger problem with that, it feels like, than we do, hey, game of musical chairs, let's sit down before there's no chairs left.
Yeah. Well, and I'll go back to some of the comments. So we aren't always consistent in our messaging, right? So I had coaches who said, wow, people just move. Well, they have to wait. So Oklahoma and Texas, we announced in 21, they had to wait 3 years. There's no student athlete in the transfer portal who waits 3 years. Yeah. We complain about 3 months now. So from a philosophic consistency, I think some of these quick sound bites aren't accurate to reality. For us, I'm going to go back to the conversations I had with the president at Oklahoma and the president at Texas. It was, we've watched how your conference has functioned. We've watched how it's made decisions. We've watched how you led. We want to be a part of that. I actually think, to your point, if you put the money in front of every other element of decision making, you don't make good decisions in life, whether that's personally or professionally. Yeah. And so for us, we looked at the right affiliations, the right geography, the ability to restore rivalries. You think about Texas and Texas A&M playing again. Oklahoma, Missouri were part of the Big Eight. Texas and Arkansas is a legendary game. We do disrupt some things, but we actually restore more. That's actually a unique conference expansion template relative to what's happening around us.
Yeah, I got less problem with the SEC than I do some of these, other conferences that, no need to mention names here. So
no, I'll take that as a compliment. You get a win in this world.
You don't want me to call Jack Swarbrick and get his comments on the SEC. Well, I don't even know what he thinks. Do you get along with all these commissioners, with the other conferences? Anybody not like you?
There've probably been moments. If you go back to the summer of 21, there wasn't a lot of warmth in the room. So that was when we announced the invitations to Oklahoma and Texas. I think there's been a thawing. I'm now like the good guy, right? Because I'm not out there recruiting, talking to. Jack and I get along great. I value Jack's perspective. And even well, we might disagree on elements of terminology. I think being as direct as Jack can be is really beneficial. So yeah, we have views, we have differences. We do have a responsibility to collaborate. Dan, I think that actually informs your question about, do we need somebody to lead? There has to be the ability for some of us to give and some of us to take, and those roles to be reversed over time. And I think we've made a contribution in potential expansion of the college football playoff. When it started, we didn't want to have that. Everybody else in the room had needs, and yet we compromised. And I would hope that we can continue to collaborate even through all of these changes.
You and Jack ever talk about Notre Dame joining the SEC?
No, I think he's got a healthy affiliation. We talk about the future.
Do you like
But
how I threw that in at the end? Just
yeah, I did.
casual.
I did. I went up to when Georgia played
Yeah.
just to see a football game. I was at Notre Dame's game in Georgia. But I respect the history that Notre Dame has. In fact, Dan, I'm asked even in my own conference meetings, why Notre Dame has their role in the CFP, for example. And I said, you know what, I think that's really healthy for college football. You yourself talked about traditions, and even though we're in a time of change and we've been a part of that change, we can still honor a number of traditions. And so Jack and I have had that conversation, certainly.
Good to talk to you. Hope you have a great day. I don't know what is the rest of the day. Give us an for example, for instance.
Yeah, there's a video conference with the NCAA president next. We have our track and field coaches who produce Olympians and national champions in for a meeting. I'm preparing for a baseball coaches meeting where we've won the last 4 national championships, so never miss an opportunity at the hype. Our presidents and chancellors have a video conference today as we look at some of the difficult issues present in college athletics. There are 2 more things on my agenda, a couple of calls with ADs, checked in with my officiating coordinator. We just finished a staff meeting. First phone call this morning was 7:30. So the days move along.
It's all downhill after this interview. You know that.
Yeah, it is. I just want to be on the Dublin invite.
Okay, next year, Florida State is going to be playing Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I probably don't need to be in that one. That would create too much internet fodder.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Florida State rumors start to percolate, and then you're over there in Dublin. But there's an open invitation.
Okay, well, that's a good reverse there on me. You got me.
Thank you, Jack. I'm sorry, Craig. I'm still on Jack Swarbrick.
Yeah, no, I like to
my good buddy from Dublin, Jack Swarbrick. Thank you, Greg. We appreciate your time as always.
Absolutely. Good to see you.
That's the commissioner of the SEC.